So you have all heard me talk about my coach training and the communities that I worked with out in California with my coach, Rich Litvin, where I would go with just meet crowds of incredible people. One of those people was Harry Pickens. I met Harry several times in California, seen him perform with Rich's wife, seen him just play music. He plays music on Facebook, and we've connected a few times heart to heart. He's one of those people that I follow and cherish that our paths cross. Then a few weeks ago, when all hell broke loose across the country and protests were in every street across America and across the world, I was doing my lives every day, and I started to talk a little bit about racism and race relations and all that stuff, and just stumbling across it as best I could, as we all were. And Harry gave me a call because he wanted to talk about something that I said. And I don't even remember what it was. It doesn't really matter. What mattered was Harry and I got to connect and have a conversation. So I said, instead of just having the conversation between you and I, why don't we do it on mic so that we can actually just share this with all of you? So let me just tell you who he is. He is an award-winning performance artist, like an amazing pianist. You can listen to him for hours. He's a composer. He's an educator. He wrote a book called Lessons in Life from a Life in Music, because he's had a multifaceted career as a jazz pianist with hundreds and hundreds of collaborations with some of the world's great. He recently performed with the Dalai Lama. It's pretty incredible. Besides music, though, he's dedicated his research into neuroscience to help ordinary people create extraordinary lives. He's particularly interested, though, in how this cutting-edge research and psychology can help positive social change. So he writes a lot about that on Facebook. So I'm going to give you ways to follow him so you can learn a lot. But Harry, thank you for being on the show.
It's awesome to be here with you, Mark. I've appreciated and admired you for a long time, and it's just great to have a conversation.
You
Continue.
know, every once in a while, I have someone on the podcast, and I tell my audience, I said, I don't know what we're going to talk about because I just want to share this person with you, and you're one of those people. But we actually have a little bit of an agenda because a few weeks ago, about a month ago, Black Lives Matter and the social unrest and the social inequality was forefront. Now it's still at the forefront, but it's starting to quiet. It's starting to move into we've got murder hornets, we've got political stuff, and it's starting to just become part of our conversation. But I really want to keep this conversation going because I don't really know how to talk about it best. I'm willing to stumble around on my own, and I think that those of us in midlife, we're caught in a place where we remember certain things from our childhoods. We didn't grow up like my kids grew up very differently, right? And we didn't grow up like our parents grew up, which was really differently. So being in the sandwich generation and having these conversations is just a fascinating place to be. So I asked you earlier, what would you want people to walk away from this conversation with? And you had an answer.
Yeah, I said eyes wide open hope. That is a sense of optimism and possibility that comes not from denial or deflection or dismissing things, but actually by seeing what's actually going on. I think we here in the United States have this amazing opportunity, and we also have sort of a blind spot because what we've grown up for so long is like focusing on innovation and focusing on individual achievement and everything. And at the same time, when we start expanding our perspective to see these larger issues like systemic issues and historical issues, a lot of the times we don't always find a way to be present with both. Like, let's look at the crap that's going on, and also let's mobilize the best of ourselves to deal with it. So I think some combination of those things.
So what you've been having conversation after conversation after conversation. So in some places it's been opening up to be able to have the conversation because things are right before our eyes. I know that I see things. I thought I was woke 2 months ago,
Yeah.
right? Now I thought I was more woke a month ago, and even every day, the on one hand the horror of what I didn't know, seeps into my heart, right? And then on the other hand, there's like, oh wow, this is coming out. Like, can we face that and move forward?
That is the question, Mark. I love you for many reasons, but one is your capacity to articulate these things. Like, okay, the way I see it, we're in this, and it's not only about race, but race is the central topic right now. We're in this massive global transformation crisis where all these old ways of being and thinking and looking are starting to break down. And in the middle of that, we're dealing with like grief and horror and shock. And at the same time, there's the opportunity for, oh, maybe this time we human beings will wake up to our commonalities and to the compassion that's inside us, you know. Yeah, it's an amazing time. Also, like thinking of midlife, because I mean, I just turned 60, and so I'm sort of in midlife in a way. You
I'm
know,
58, and I'm telling you right now, 60 is
oh,
fine.
well, I feel like I'm about to start the third act of my life, right? And you know, as you know, I spent the last 9 years taking care of my mom as her caregiver, and she just passed away last November. And so my whole life was just beginning to take off, and then we had COVID. I'm in the house, you know, and so the
Mm.
last few months have been this deep, deep reflection and taking a look at the bigger picture of things and what's going on and how do we deal with it. But anyhow, back to race. I really appreciate you using the word horror because my experience of it is that when you really begin to look at the fuller picture of the historical realities of race in the United States, if you keep your eyes open to that and you can do it, you know, really without turning away, a natural response is going to be disgust, despair, horror, and moral outrage. Because if you can actually find yourself and this is not just about being quote unquote woke, because I think waking up is a progressive process.
Sure. I used it to be cliche and
I get it. I get it. Yeah. But, you know, I think so much of what's getting in our way, I'm having these conversations, is the fact that we collectively are not always willing to like look it right in the eye. And then when you like Emmett Till, you know, the young man who was beaten and murdered when he was 14 years old for allegedly flirting with a white lady in a grocery store. We found out it never happened, but he was bludgeoned and murdered brutally. And that story, part of
hold on, I didn't want to get that missed. We found out that he did not do it, that the woman lied.
oh, absolutely,
And, right.
she lied. So I mean, completely bogus. And the two men who murdered him were never brought to justice. But you know, part of what catalyzed the public outcry was she insisted that he be buried in an open coffin. So, and you can go Google Emmett Till, and you will see the picture that appeared in Jet magazine of his. He was completely unrecognizable, and the horror of that really awakened people on a deeper level to what was happening. Well, using that as an example, when you give yourself the permission to actually look at that face in that coffin and feel the horror involved, and then you do a little bit more studying and find out how it happened and how that was pretty typical for that time in the United States. If you can allow yourself to feel that and metabolize it in your body, then I think your heart can crack open in a way that can allow us to really have the conversation. What happens often is that folks who haven't been able or willing to just look at what is stay on a superficial level or a defensive level or a deflecting level or whatever. I mean, you know, as a coach, like when you're working with somebody, if they can hear the truth, right? If they can actually hear what's going on, then there's a possibility of it changing. If they keep going back and forth and back and forth and pretending, and they're not willing to see that, then change is harder. So I think the good thing about what's happening is that more and more people are becoming willing to just look.
You know, it's interesting because it's not just the race issue, it's our own families. When we start digging in our own families, we don't want to see the horror of what happened there.
Oh my God.
We'll block out things, we'll change things from the past in our own experience to make them more palatable and to be able to live with them. So when we take it outside ourselves, you know, for me, one of the things, you know, was we were watching a documentary on Grant and the Civil War.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of mind-blowing. I learned so much. But the thing that really shocked me, again, I've read history, but I didn't get it,
Yeah.
was what happened when Reconstruction, when Grant started Reconstruction,
Oh yeah.
and then the backlash
Yep.
to Reconstruction, the violent, just barbaric backlash to
Yes.
Reconstruction. It took me a minute to digest that, to see how absolute, we didn't have a civil war and then everybody went along their merry way. This
No.
was really ugly and hard to hold on to. Just like when I started realizing things about my childhood,
Yeah.
realizing I was molested, realizing all these things, like I have to hold these things first before I can actually have a conversation.
Well, this is a really great point because where I'm going with this in my own work and service is like developing training for people who want to be so-called allies, right? But training is basically psychospiritual because my experience and observation is that we have a massive amount of collective trauma that we need to heal. Just like the trauma of an individual from being molested or beaten or whatever, we've got trauma. So, I mean, imagine, okay, so I have to hold in my body and my experience the fact that my ancestors maybe were lynched, right? You have to hold in your body and your experience the fact that maybe your ancestors were some of the folks who dressed up on their Sunday go to meeting clothes for a selfie in front of this guy who had just been, strangled and disemboweled in public as a collective celebration, right?
Personally, the
Oh,
one I'm dealing with is my ancestors are all gone because they were in the Holocaust. So they're
exactly.
like there's no history before my great grandparents. Like there's nobody there. So
Yes,
that's mine. That's my way of getting out of being one of the guys with the selfie in front of the lynching. So
of course, I understand. Yeah,
we were
but
busy.
well, I think it's a good. And the point is, we all have that unprocessed trauma, whether it's your trauma from your ancestors in the Holocaust, and my trauma, whatever. And I think it's the capacity. What I know from my own inner work and my work with clients is the capacity to be able to metabolize, process, and heal that is a foundation for really moving forward. Otherwise, I'm in a conversation with you, but I'm really not talking to you. I'm really talking to somebody that was mean to me 30 years ago, or you're
Always,
talking,
always,
it's
always.
all that stuff. So yeah, I think we need to find a way of holding those horrid realities, expanding so we can hold them in a powerful, compassionate way. Because my feeling about it, Mark, is unless we can do that, we can never have a real conversation. Because our
So
conversation,
what you're saying is the people who are saying, because I hear a lot of it in my world,
yeah,
is let's just go from here forward. Let's just move on, right? Let the past be the past, and let's just move on. Which people say in families, which people say in all
right.
kinds of things. What's the problem with that?
The problem with that, okay, so let's talk about on the individual level. What happens in trauma is that you have an experience that your brain, body, and being perceives as life-threatening. And so a whole cascade of neurochemical and emotional patterns start showing up. Basically, you're 5 years old and you're in a car accident and your little 5-year-old brain says, oh my gosh, I don't ever want that to happen again. So you develop a capacity of being maybe anxious, or maybe you develop a phobia where you don't leave the house, or something else. Maybe when you hear certain sounds, you get anxious. Your brain is trying to protect you. The same thing happens. You date a woman or a guy who has red hair and freckles when you're 17 and they do you wrong. So for the rest of your life, you don't trust people with red hair and freckles, but you don't quite know why, right? So what happens is that trauma has created a schema or a pattern in your brain that habituates your response to the present. So you're not responding to the present, you're responding to the past. So you can't actually create the future you want as long as you're basically looking in the rear view mirror at those traumas of the past. You're not clear and clean to create the future you want, right? And so moving on without healing that just keeps all of those patterns in place. And we know historically the oppressed become the oppressor becomes the oppressed.
And Animal Farm over and over
Over
and
and
over
over
again.
and over and over. And so, unless we want to have a society that constantly goes back and forth from whoever happens to be the boss this century or maybe this millennium or whatever, screwing the others, and we'll never create a future that works for everybody until we heal the past. Plus, here's the other part: most Americans don't know what the past is because
That's
most
that's
Americans,
that's so huge. So now
yeah,
let's go to this next piece, which is
yeah,
so let's talk about actually bringing these things up and putting it in the, why is it important to rewrite the history books that I learned in school that were total bogus whitewashing, to use a better word, and not just about race relations. It's
oh
just
no,
about everything, right?
no, yeah. I mean that's so important. There's a wonderful book I recommend. It's called Lies My Teacher Told Me, and I've got a copy of it right here by James Lowen. And this book was written in 1995, and he worked at the Smithsonian Institution, and he analyzed 12 American history textbooks to actually take a look at how much these textbooks actually had to do with historical reality. And the truth is they had very little. You
Yeah.
know, even the fact, Columbus, number one, didn't discover America because there were people who were in this continent before he got here, right?
Right.
And also people who came, the Vikings came here, the Chinese came here, whatever, thousands of years before. Um, and the heroification that the way history is taught. Okay, we had this person, and he or she was the noble hero, and they were perfect. Thomas Jefferson, okay. Thomas Jefferson was brilliant. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. He was an innovator in many ways. He also raped, at the age of 44, he raped a 16-year-old who was enslaved to him. How would you feel if your son, how would you feel if your daughter, who was 16, was going with a 44-year-old guy who basically raped her and kept her in his next to his room in his mansion, and she couldn't go? I mean, we put somebody like that in jail.
Right.
But both are true. Thomas Jefferson was brilliant, and he also raped Sally Heming. George Washington was the father of the country, and he owned 300 slaves. So it's like being able to hold those paradoxes is what we are not taught to do in history or in school. We're given, quote, pardon the pun, black and white, super simple answers. So from my perspective, again, and this is one of the wonderful things that's coming out of Black Lives Matter movement. We're starting to see that the history we've been taught, number one, it's simplistic. Number two, it's biased. And number three, it doesn't give us a realistic idea of how history is created. History is messy, and history is always a matter of options and choices. And when we're given the idea that, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened, and individuals really didn't have any choice in the matter, then we are disempowered now making choices.
It's such a, you bring us to a point of confront and a moment of truth, of can I look directly at it and deal with myself,
Yeah.
and the question is, how do we prepare ourselves? Because I know when you're a coach, I'm a coach. It takes me a while to work with people so that they can look at certain things and that they can have the capacity to hold it and then marinate in it and then
Yes.
have a new insight.
Yes.
How do we help people, like just in this conversation between you and I, how can we help people walk away with, all right, I'm going to look at another documentary about what might really have happened, or I'm going to read a book of what might really have happened, and I'm going to let that in?
That's the best question, Mark, because that's what I've been reflecting on a lot, and I think one of the best things you can do is use some simple tools of mindful awareness to expand your capacity to just be with whatever is. There's this old saying, emotions are the weather, awareness is the sky. Emotions are always changing. You're happy one minute, you're sad. But if you go above the sky, the cloud cover, to awareness, you just watch. You learn how to watch. So one thing is to, whether you have a meditative practice or you just like yawn and stretch, or you walk in nature, but you practice just observing. And you observe, oh, when I see that, I feel my stomach hurts, or I feel joyful, or you start by just observing. Then what you learn how to do And this is part of what I teach people to do. You consciously reset your nervous system. So, for example, one simple way that you can reset your nervous system literally is having a really slow, mindful yawn and stretch. And so you do that really slowly and mindfully while you're watching that documentary or while you're reading the book. You take just a moment to reset
Mm.
your nervous system in that moment. So if you've ever heard of tapping or EFT, you can do it that way. You can do it through gently massaging yourself. You can do it through standing, feeling the soles of your feet, and breathing really slowly. But the point is,
I'm gonna slow you down for a second. So
yeah,
you're watching a documentary on the History Channel, and it's a good one, and it's realistic, and it's really uncomfortable and painful. What you're saying is that you can soothe yourself. You
in that
can
moment,
calm yourself, bring yourself present, and it keeps your mind from going, yeah, but or fixing,
exactly,
like and doing all that stuff, and you just stay with it, so that now it becomes part of you, and not in
exactly.
an unhealthy way.
Right. Yeah. So you're watching the documentary, and so there's one modality called havening, which involves very very gently stroking, like you give yourself a hug, you stroke the from the shoulders down to the elbows, you stroke your palms together, you gently rub your face. You can also do that. You can soothing slow touch is a way to do it. Literally yawning. Yawning is a thermoregulator in the brain. It also resets your nervous system. So yawning, stretching, moving really, really slowly, all of those things, taking a deep breath, having like aromatherapy, some essential oils or something like that. The point is to keep yourself in a state of relaxed, mindful, present moment awareness, even as you're watching the thing that is disturbing. And so that allows you to then you don't check out, you stay present to it. And then the other thing is really important, if you're watching something like that, process it with somebody else or a group, where you can talk about what you just saw and explore it and let it. The secret is metabolizing it, letting it
Mm.
actually go into your body. And then once you do that, once you can do that, then there's also practices you can do. For example, reflecting on, putting your attention on your heart and feeling a sense of gratitude in the heart and just letting that sense expand. And so you can imagine that your heart is actually, you're breathing in the pain, you're breathing out love. This is a variation of something called metta or loving kindness meditation. So you breathe in like black smoke, which is the pain and the difficulty. You breathe out golden love. The more you do that, you are literally developing your biological, psychological capacity to manage to metabolize difficult emotions without them crushing you. You know, so that's really important. You want to learn how to reset your brain so you can be relaxed and mindful and present no matter what's going on. And you can actually train yourself. So say you saw that horrible video of George Floyd or something else that really upset you, and it's upsetting you even now. What you can do is you can take a moment and think about that. And while you think about that, yawn really deeply, relax really deeply, look around the room and see everything that's there while you're consciously in this state of relaxation. And that will begin to de-link the emotional pain from that memory. So then you can witness that, you can think about it, and of course you're touched, but you don't collapse.
Collapse or reject.
Or deny, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Right, because that's the other piece. So it just reminds me, my friend Richard Weiner uh, was in the Holocaust,
Hmm.
and his family fled the Holocaust, but his friends at school, like the people he went to school with, turned on him. Right, like one minute he was part of the community, next minute he had to run for his life.
Mm-hmm.
um, and it was decades later that he went back and they asked his forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't feel like he needed to like he forgave them in his own heart, but they needed his forgiveness to let go of their trauma. Right, they,
Absolutely.
they gave him the key to Wittenberg. The mayor gave him the key, and there was a healing on both sides because
Yes.
they were holding that for decades also.
Yes.
And then it makes me think about all of the protections around the Confederate flag, the
Yes.
Confederate monuments, and all the denial and all the pushback.
Right.
If we're going to have compassion for each human being, because if collectively it's easy to go, that's hateful, but if you sit with each human being, all they're trying to do is reconcile with this historical pain, with the present pain, and trying to figure out how to alchemize it without the tools. So they come out
Well, I mean,
offensive.
yeah, when you think about it, I mean, being like a Southern white guy is one of the most, I would imagine to be one of the most difficult ways to be to, if you look at like the different racial, and gender and cultural identities to have right now, to be like a white guy born in Mississippi or Georgia or whatever, who, number one, has been taught your entire life that certain realities are real and you realize they're not. But secondly, to actually face in a fully embodied way your own ancestors' history, not only their cruelty to blacks, but also how they got screwed as well.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a massive amount of pain if you actually let yourself feel it. Of course you're going to defend. Of course you're going to push back. Of course, I mean, it's if you understand trauma, it makes perfect sense, right? So I think part of the issue here is, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm developing a series of programs. One's for white folks, one's for Black and Indigenous people of color, and one's for bringing people together for those kinds of rituals, because part of what has to happen is, like, white folks need to mourn and grieve and be outraged for what Black folks went through. And we all also need to help the white folks whose ancestors were part of this horrible, horrible system come to terms with that.
Hmm.
And that's, I mean, Mark, there's a crap load of pain for all of us, right?
Oh, there's enough to go around, both personally and societally.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think there's like three things to be done. I think there's work for white folks to do around facing the reality. Number one, there's work for white folks to do about healing their own trauma. There's work for Black and Indigenous folks to do around healing their own trauma that comes from race. And there's work that we have to do together about how can we get to the point where I fully inhabit my brown body, you fully inhabit your white body, and at the same time we both see those realities, and I see your spiritual essence. So I mean, it's like it's not one or the other. It's not like, oh, we're all lives matter because we're all spiritual. No, it's like it's being able to hold all of those at once.
Yeah,
and that's hard work,
It is. It's hard. Again, it's like the hardest work on an individual level to help a nation, a world, a people do that. It seems like one of those impossible things that absolutely has to be attempted.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, it's challenging, but it's like climbing Mount Everest. Like it has to be done. I mean, what's been most interesting for me is because I'm in the process of like really studying all this, because I want to create offerings that meet a need that's not currently being met in the world. There's a lot of education. There's a lot of how to have conversations with your neighbors or your friends or your family, whatever. But this whole psycho-spiritual aspect of the deeper healing, the more I dig into it, the more I'm feeling like we've got to get to the point where we can each accept the historical realities that touch us personally, the historical realities that we're partly responsible for, all of that. And we've got to be able to metabolize that and transform it into loving compassion. Because if we can do that, then we can stand in, then we can, I mean, I had probably like 40 white friends reach out to me in the last 3 or 4 weeks, saying, hey, Harry, I just realized you're Black. Let's talk. I mean, but I mean, they realized that, I was like George Floyd or whatever. And so tell me about your experience. And it's been beautiful. And what allows me to navigate those conversations, as well as conversations with my Black and Indigenous and people of color, my friends, and people who are in a different political place or whatever, is the fact that I've done a lot of my own inner work to be able to metabolize that trauma and those horrors. And so when I look at you, I see you, I mean, I know you got white skin, and I acknowledge your part in that larger system. And I'm also able to connect with you on that core spiritual being level. And we need them both.
So that's the distinction that you've made. And you know, when this first started happening, you were calling out people who are in our industry about skipping over the part of
Okay.
seeing our skin color, of seeing where we are in society, and just wanting to jump specifically to the essence part. And that just short circuits the wholeness of the connection.
Well, the funny thing is, I've never connected with like a black or indigenous or Latinx, or I've never connected with a coach who is not. I've never, let me put. Only white folks do the spiritual bypass thing. There's only white folks do that in my experience. You know, I've never experienced somebody who's been on the other side of the American experience who is even capable of that, is capable of that kind of bypass, you know. So I definitely call it out, because I think, yes, we're all spiritual beings, and that didn't really help Emmett Till, did it?
Right.
Yes, we're all spiritual beings, and that really didn't help, God, name them all,
You know, I just
Brianna.
I just recently learned of a Hasidic saying is we understand and we know that God is one, God is everything, and that we're all part of God,
Yeah.
and we should live as if God doesn't exist.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, huh, because and again, in you know, in kind of non-duality circles where it's easy to bypass,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was talking to one of my teachers, and he said, nothing matters,
Right.
everything counts.
Yes.
So, in
Beautiful.
other words, nothing matters. We are all one. None of this is really real anyway. And it counts because we're here right now dealing with this. And I was like, huh, that is
Yes.
so, that was for me, you know, as I've taken this journey, because there's part of the spiritual journey of divorcing myself from Mark, divorcing myself
Right.
from my skin color, divorcing
Yeah.
myself from what's happening in society,
Yeah.
you know. So there's a moment where I'm jettisoned, and now there's a bringing back to, oh, before enlightenment I chop wood, carry water. After
Right.
enlightenment I chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment there's racism. After enlightenment there's racism. And
Exactly.
there's nothing my spiritual experience is going to do about that.
Yeah, yeah, that's so beautiful, because I agree. It reminds me of, in the Christian tradition, there's a phrase, Christ has no hands but yours. In other words, like we in these bodies, in the physical bodies, have this remarkable gift of free will, whereby we can choose to embody, enact, and express our highest divine qualities of love, life, and light, or we cannot, right? And so my personal experience and observation and study and reflection is that the nature of creation, source, God, whatever you want to call it, is ultimately love, is ultimately light or wisdom, is ultimately life or vitality. And so my job as a human being is to refine my capacity to be an instrument of love and life and light, for the purpose of transforming, bringing heaven to earth, or like bringing that love, light, and light into manifestation here and now. And if I mean, I think the reason that non-dualities become sort of a pop, there's a pop version of that, and spirituality, whatever, is and again, this is my perspective. Real spirituality, Mark, is hard freaking work,
No kidding, man.
because
But and the attraction of the non-duality, and I loved it for a while because it did give me a freedom, because I
absolutely.
was in prison for so long that it gave me a freedom that I didn't want to give up. Like, I'm free, I'm light, I'm good. Like, I don't have to worry about this. And then, you know, the maturing in that comes, which was like, it's like shit.
Yeah, well, they did, because then, like the real freedom is, okay, can I be present in the midst of all of this hell breaking loose on the physical plane, and still be free? That's what I call it. That's like eyes wide open hope, eyes wide open peace, eyes wide open because anybody can be free sitting on a yoga seat with your eyes closed in the mountain in the retreat with the incense and the heck.
I was watching a video this morning. I start my morning with my coffee at 5:30 in the morning, and I was watching this guy Muji Baba,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I
I
love
love.
I just love him. And the woman asked the question. She says, she says, I just don't want to be around people anymore. I find peace when I'm by myself. I feel contented. I feel one. I feel love. She says, I don't want to be around people. I don't even want to be around my kids. And Muji was just so wonderful. And then he said, the goal is to find that, because first of all, the joke is that there's other for you to go out and see. And then the answer to the joke is to go out into the world to see there is no other and to have that peace in the midst of all. And I just, I love his practical wisdom there.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it's
and I think that's the hope that you're talking about.
absolutely. I mean, it's so easy, especially if you're more of an introvert. Like anybody can turn on love by themselves, away from the world. The work is okay. Can I love my spouse, kids, colleagues, friend, not so much friend, enemy? Can I love Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi, whatever side you're on, right? Can I really hold each or both of those beings as sacred beings? Doesn't mean I won't disagree with them every moment, every step of the way. I
Right.
live in Kentucky, Mitch McConnell. There is nothing that I would agree about with Mitch McConnell, right? And at the same time, there's a place in me that understands the non-duality that can hold Mitch McConnell as an embodied spiritual being who deserves to be treated with respect. It doesn't mean I will not do everything I can to get him out of office, right?
Right.
But I remember Ram Dass talked about having an altar, and he had his guru on the altar. He had like all these beautiful pictures, and he had the first George Bush's, either the first or the second George Bush's picture on the altar. The whole point is his spiritual practice was learning to see God as much in George Bush as in his guru.
Mm.
You know, and man,
I,
that's hard. That's hard. That's hard stuff.
no, I have to say that I do credit Donald Trump with the most advanced in my spiritual program uh, of anything that's ever happened, because I really had to confront the nature of reality, the nature of my reality, and everybody else's, and it
Yeah.
really has brought me to a whole new place of peace and connectedness to people who I disagree with and don't live in the same world with, which again gives me the hope, to be able to be with people and understand that they don't live in the same world I do.
Well, the funny thing that happens, what I've discovered, because you probably see, I have a lot of conversations on Facebook about political topics or whatever, race, and I have discovered pretty consistently, with a few exceptions, but if I can respond to somebody's, even their vitriol, in a way that is non-resistant, like in Aikido, you use the opponent's you punches to you don't use your own energy, you let their own energy, you work with their own energy. If I can be, if I can rest in my own center, and I can approach that person from a space of curiosity and presence, then not always, but a lot more than chance or average, we come to some common understanding. And there have been a few cases where people have really shifted their perspective
Mm.
profoundly because they kept coming at me throwing all this crap, and I just kept coming back with clarity and compassion, not changing my perspective, but also honoring that they are a human being too.
Yeah, I have to do that in my own marriage. It's sometimes it's a Herculean effort. No, not as much anymore, because like I've gone through the absolute insanity of the whole thing, and now to where, like I could cry how much I love, my husband,
Wow.
and not the political views. I
Oh,
just, like, that's not why I'm here. And like I now can see the difference between the two. So it's really an interesting world. Um, so give me some hope to leave people with in this conversation. What makes you hopeful?
I had a wonderful conversation with a wonderful man named Peter Block, who's an author. He was very involved in consulting for years, and now he works in community development. And this was around the time of the Iraq War, 2004. So we were both about to do a presentation. We were both speaking to the same group, and I was backstage with him. I said, Peter, what gives you hope? And he said 4 words to me, Mark, that changed my life. He says, hope is a choice.
Mm.
Hope is a choice. And so I believe hope lies in choice capacity. That is, if you or somebody listening to this podcast, okay, so let's look at it. I break this whole process of becoming an ally in the racial justice movement to five steps. The first stage is just acknowledgement. Yeah, these things happen. The second stage is witnessing, not just intellectually, but actually witnessing with your eyes. So you look at the documentary, you look at Emmett Till, you look at these things, so you let them come in. The third is metabolizing it, really feeling it in your body, your heart. As you said, feeling the horror, letting yourself really be with that. The fourth step is transforming that through your spiritual practice or whatever, so you bring compassion, you bring love, you bring awareness to those things. And as you've done that, something changes inside you. And then you become empowered to co-create, to have those conversations with your family, your friends, to have conversations with people of different races, cultures, creeds. But I don't think you can get there unless you go through those first steps. You got to acknowledge it's happening. You got
No, you can't skip it. You can't skip a step, because then it's disingenuous, and it doesn't create that magic.
Yeah. But if you can do that, if you're willing to do that, which is hard work and it's work that's worthwhile, then you can get to a place where your own experience in your conversations and relationships with other people who are different than you begins to light a candle of hope. And then you expand that. You think, okay, how can I influence the larger society? You know, who can I join? Where can I contribute money or time or talent in this larger movement? And then I think here's the last piece, Mark, that is a practice I've done for 25 years. It's really powerful. It's asking the question, what world would love build? What country would love build? And really, really resting in that question, and then asking the second question, how can I serve that vision? And what can I do right now? Because that orients you in this. I mean, I believe that what we are, the core of our spiritual essence is, like I said, love, light, and light. Love, which is compassion, connection. Life, which is vitality and just the joy of existence. And light, which is wisdom. And I think when we use our awareness to ask, what world, what nation, what community, what family, what kind of family would love build? Then it orients us in that quality and opens up our intuition, so then we can listen and we can move forward. So starts with truth.
Stunning. So Harry, you did it. You helped me have the conversation that fits perfectly into what I want to create here. What would love create in a podcast? You just did it. So I thank you. So I know people can find your book on Amazon, Lessons in Life from a Life in Music, because I looked it up, and I'm going to put that in the show notes so people can read about your life. I'm also going to put the link to your Facebook page, because I don't think you have a personal page.
Yeah, follow me on Facebook. That's the best thing. And because I'm in the process right now, as I mentioned, I'm really deeply studying it, and we'll launch by the fall a series of courses and workshops. One is called Allied. What Allied is about becoming empathically empowered in the racial justice journey. So this is for white folks who want to enter this whole, who want to enter this from the most powerful, empowered, compassionate way they can. And then I'll also have offerings for Black and Indigenous people of color, and then also an offering that's about coming together and doing that forgiveness work, doing that courageous conversation work, and doing the work that will allow us to create love's vision of this world. That's what it's about.
That's beautiful. So let me know how I can help you with that, and we will continue talking. So thank you for being here, Harry. Thank you for being your brilliant self.
Love you, Mark.
I love you too. To everybody else, if you follow Harry, not only are you going to get wisdom and you're going to get educated and you're going to see really cool conversations. Every once in a while, he turns on his camera and he plays piano. And if you want to be just transcendent, just listen to that. So thank you again. If you found this useful, please, please, please share this podcast and share the video, because I'm going to put the video on YouTube. And as many people as possible. This is one of the most healing conversations I've had, and I've had a lot for me. So I'm hoping for everybody else. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you guys. Be kind to yourself. Drink lots of water. Get rest, because we're still in the middle of a lot of stress. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.